Right, hi guys, Luton here. So today I want to talk a little bit about this game which is coming up, it's in development, it's called Ancient Cities. I want this to be potentially part of a new series I'm going to do called like Heads Up, where I'm basically giving you a heads up on games that are coming up, games that are in early development and you should be maybe looking at and keeping your interest in. I'm not sure how often these kind of things are going to come along, but if I can do it regularly I will do it. I think it's pretty interesting and it enables me to bring some, other content your way. Now this was one which kind of passed me by a little bit, but that's okay because it's still in extremely early developmental phase. Now what this game is kind of like a city builder community development simulation, and it's set within the very, very early history of mankind. So we're talking about sort of Neolithic periods, hunter-gatherer tribes, this kind of thing. Now why am I excited about this? Well, I'm excited about this because this concept is a game that I've actually wanted for quite some time. If anybody remembers, of course, the classic kind of Age of Empires, but also games like Age of Mythology, okay? Now in those games, you would often play in the very, very early stages of the game in this historical period, the kind of hunter-gatherer period where you are a tribe, you're trying to sort of create the very early beginnings of some kind of community. And then, of course, you develop over time, but I always felt personally like that time went by way too fast, and I always felt as well like there was not enough detail within that time period, there was not enough detail in what it was you were doing. I really wanted to see a game which focused heavily on this very early period where you're basically, catching animals, getting their leather, getting their skins, trying to survive winter, trying to survive different diseases, plagues, surviving raids by other tribes, all these kind of things. Now of course there are other games which simulate this. Of course we have Banished, where you're playing as a kind of medieval community, you're trying to survive and manage your food stocks, and I would imagine that there's going to be definitely sort of similarities and comparisons to be made between this upcoming game and games like that. But again, there's various other games which deal with this. Recently we had another small indie game come out called Kingdoms and Castles, which I played on the live stream and I've looked at a little bit there as well, and that kind of covers very similar themes of kind of community development, managing a town, managing a city. These games are much more they're less RTS games as much as they are more kind of management games. You're really sort of managing your community, managing the people's needs. Have they got enough food? Have they got enough shelter? Have they got enough warmth? And that's the kind of thing that you're looking at. It's about kind of efficiently managing these things, taking into account their needs, looking ahead to the future, thinking about, what could happen, preparing for that kind of stuff, making sure you got enough food for the winter, making sure that you're managing people's time properly so that they're covering the tasks they need to get done and keeping everybody safe, keeping everybody happy, until you can get to this kind of stage here we see where you're creating kind of a flourishing community. And you can see that in the game they're needing to build defenses, they're needing to build walls to protect against perhaps dangerous animals or other tribes that want to attack them. So what have they got so far for features? Well, they've got, of course, the house building and all this kind of stuff, procedural world generation, they've got a day-night cycle, they've got simulated seasonal cycles, weather simulation based on real data, so I assume that just means kind of random changing weather, wild animal life and plant cycles of life, so that's kind of cool that they actually have animal life cycles as well, a farming system, step-by-step structure building and effects, resource collection and storage, a family tree for citizens, character attributes, AI to some extent, including pathfinding and job selection, so that's again your kind of basic management AI. Citizens' basic needs like eating, drinking, sleeping and resting, again, we see this in kind of management sims. A technology system, some items of each type to test technology like plants and animals and buildings, and a decay also of resources and buildings. I like that there's a decay there, that you actually have to have some kind of maintenance going on. I think that's a really good thing as well. So other features they want to have in final release, so the idea that you can configure your gameplay enabling combat and natural disasters even, or simply just relax in building your city. They want you to be able to discover the lands around by sending out exploring parties, maybe to find resources and other things. Factions, you have other tribes also competing for your actual resources, and then you could even build up power or maybe alliances between them. You want to have cities, so populated places where you can trade and or raid with their own religion and culture and economy. Migrations, you might need to migrate your whole camp due to a famine or a sickness, and that's going to also help to spread your religion, or I guess it's going to be, when you say religion, we're talking about very early kind of religions. As well as hunter parties that are going to help explore the map as well, but search for new hunting grounds where you're going to find a good group of animals that they can stay with for a while. That kind of goes hand in hand with actually how kind of hunter-gatherer tribes always used to operate. And world events which can change the course of history. That's a bit vague, but no idea what that could be. So when we come to the actual cities themselves, when your camp has grown big enough, so you want to survive the unforgiving nature of the environment to actually build structures to live and then to defend against raiders and predators. So I think that's what we're looking at with this game, is this kind of transitional period where you go from a kind of lightweight hunter-gatherer tribe where you're building sort of yurts, huts, these kind of things, and, you know, sort of scavenging from the environment around you, to transitioning to a more permanent state, which of course is actually how this happened in history. You know, we went from this period of hunter-gatherer to a more permanent sort of phase of settlement, and that's, you know, basically where they decided, when they actually developed farming and things, like, hey, it's much more efficient, it's much safer to choose a good site, a good location to stay in, farm, and actually build like a proper defended settlement. So I think that's what will happen with the game here. You'll go from this phase of moving around and finding different resources of food to finding a good location where you can settle down and actually make a good city, or a little, you know, a town at least. Okay, it talks about migration parties, so taking in new people while taking care of your existing citizens. It's going to have mining, so when you talk about mining though, it's not going to be so much mining in the sense that you might imagine it. In the very sort of early periods of man, like Neolithic periods and stuff, actual minerals and, you know, ore and this kind of thing were actually just on the surface. They were just on the surface. You maybe in caves or things like this, but, you know, you could actually find this stuff just kind of on the ground. I think that's a misconception people have when they think about sort of very early metal working and this kind of thing. They didn't need to dig into the ground. This stuff was actually just available, which is kind of how they found it. You know, they just found it on the surface. So you could actually find this stuff just in the ground, very, very close to the surface. You didn't have to go actually mining per se to get that stuff. So again, of course, you'll have like tree felling to obviously, you know, build. So you're going to need foresters, choppers, whatever you want to call it. Crops from farming, gathering, hunter-gathering, hunting, fishing for resources. But be aware that all of these things are going to be finite. So you can't, you know, we're not going to be having sort of a forester camp where they just continually are renewing. That wasn't the kind of thing which happened in this period necessarily. That came a little bit later. So they're going to be basically, you know, once you have got rid of that resource, it's going to be gone. So you have to be careful about how you manage these things. It says fishing will be finite, but I'm not quite sure how that would work, because, you know, fishing by its nature most of the time is not, you know, you don't deplete fish, certainly not in this period. So, but I guess, you know, it's part of the mechanics of the game, so I'm sure they'll make that work. Hunting, on the other hand, probably. But even then, in this period, a sort of Neolithic period, you wouldn't necessarily have, I don't think you would see a tribe depleting a food resource to, you know, devastation. For one thing, they simply just didn't have enough people or enough actual weapons and so on to do that. But I guess it's a game mechanic that they want to sort of enable you to kind of be careful about sort of managing your foods and resources and all this kind of thing. You have the ability to craft tools and weapons, food and other manufactured resources if you know how to do that. Plant seeds, crops and storage for the winter, but remember, nothing lasts forever. So again, that's talking about maybe, you know, you have to store your food, but it can't stay there for like years. You know, you've got to sort of eat that or whatever. Take care of your animals, protect them also from predator attacks. Fight back against your enemies, trade, hunt and explore beyond your city walls, or wait for other AI factions to just come to you. Praise your faith and political power, fight against other religions, spread your faith. Politics, again, lots of more building types of clothes and animals and all these kind of things. Citizens, you have those citizen traits we talked about, and also sicknesses and plagues which can actually decimate your people. It's obviously one of the worst things of all. Was in this period, again, you had very, very limited sort of herbalism, sort of medicine man style sort of things. You know, they didn't really have medicine per se or any kind of things. They would have had herbalism where they would know maybe to treat some very basic things from plants and different things like this in the environment, but probably that's about it. So if you had some kind of actual serious sickness, it could be absolutely rampantly devastating, mainly because they didn't understand about how these kind of things would have been transmitted or, you know, controlled. They already completed their Kickstarter campaign, which was very successful, but the guys here are actually running an IndieGo campaign as well to give people the opportunity, if they wish to contribute, to unlock more elements. And they've currently already been successful with that. So they've already unlocked, in addition to the ones that they unlocked through the Kickstarter, a Middle Eastern Neolithic theme. They've also unlocked user terrain. This game is going to allow you to upload height maps and use them and things like this from real-world locations. The other ones that they've got coming up are more biomes from Europe. So it says we can add more terrain, variety, plants and wildlife to European locations to give a better base game. They want to rent a small office so that developers can move out of their own homes into a small office so they can hire and, you know, basically help in a more professional, better game development period, I guess. And then sea and coastal cities, which I think sounds awesome, improving fluids to depict seas with waves and tides, and let's bring the game to some gorgeous coastal cities. So that sounds really, really cool. I very much like where this game is going so far. I think they've got some really great ideas coming in. They have got a couple of other stretch periods beyond that with these kind of expansions, which these are kind of further things in this Indiegogo campaign, so they haven't really alluded to. It's just kind of, I think they've just put them up there as things like, hey look, if we reach this goal then we can get to this. So they've put like Bronze Age, so an Atlantic European Bronze Age expansion, so better tools and weapons, more gameplay, buildings, etc. Bronze Age Mesopotamia, time of great cities, empires, dominate, irrigation, rule the world. So there's some other sort of longer term goal things that they're thinking of here. Now they've talked a little bit very vaguely about what is happening with multiplayer. Now the first thing you're going to think of is, I want to be able to have several different camps, 4-player, you know, things like Age of Empires come straight into your head. They've said pretty much that the way that this game works will not necessarily suit multiplayer. So I think they've pretty much outright said that the game won't have multiplayer. This is focused on a kind of survival city building environment game. So again, comparison to kind of something like Banished right there, not so much Age of Empires. However, they have said that, you know, if it's popular and they do well out of it, they may try to create some kind of spin-off title which maybe, I guess, simplifies some elements of it and then enables you to have some kind of multiplayer aspect to it. So that's kind of a cool thing. So I think they've kind of said, look, you know, this isn't where we were coming from, this wasn't our original intention, but if it does well, then yeah, we would like to investigate that. I think they've been, I think they've probably got a lot of morale boost from the fact that their Kickstarter was very successful and their Indiegogo continues to be successful, so they can clearly see that they have an audience, they clearly see they have a community of people who want this game to be developed, who are passionate and sort of want to see this thing. And that's really good and really positive, and I'm actually really buoyed by that as well, because this is a game, like I said, that I had thought about for a long time, because, you know, I always felt like with games like Age of Empires or even games like Civilization, I felt like you went through those very early periods way too quickly. I find the whole very early sort of period of man, like these kind of hunter-gatherer periods and sort of, you know, there was a lot of skill in the people who lived in this time, a lot of skill in the way that they made tools, the way that they hunted, the way that they lived off the environment and used all of the natural materials around them to survive and build their settlements and build their camps. And if you've ever been to an ancient site, if you've ever been to a Neolithic site or some kind of earthwork or camp or whatever, you can really see the amazing ability of the people who lived in this time, because, you know, these structures and so on that they built, especially from this period where, you know, there's often very little physical trace left of the people there on the ground. Now, Maiden Castle was one I went to. It was actually, like I say, on that sub video that I did, where I went to Maiden Castle, I filmed a video and I showed you guys around that site. And you can actually see, you know, digging out these huge earthworks, that takes a massive amount of people. And what you have to think of is that that's an amazing thing to achieve, because in this period there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of other things that the guys have to be worried about, like where are they going to get their food from, when is winter coming, you know, how are they going to survive other tribes attacking them. You know, there's lots of other considerations to take into account before you start thinking about, we're going to build this great bloody huge earthwork that's going to take us years to complete. So, you know, you need to be a basically very successful community before you start building all of this other stuff. And that's exactly where, you know, the beauty of these kind of games come in. That's where the satisfaction comes in with these kind of games, is that in order to get to a phase where you can start thinking about building these bigger camps, you have to be successful in that early game. Now, we obviously, from this period, because we haven't played this game and we don't know what it's going to be like, we don't know how difficult or challenging that's going to be, nor do we know how many kind of you know, features in terms of customization will be available to enable you to make it more difficult or easy for yourself. Now, they've kind of said, look, if you want to, you can make this basically pure building, but that doesn't necessarily tell us, is there going to be disease still, is there going to be wild animals still, other tribes. So I think probably not other tribes. I think they want it to be where you don't get attacked, you just get to focus on managing your community and so on and so on. But then of course they have the other mode where you can get attacked, but again, we don't know how difficult that's going to be, we don't know how challenging that's going to be. I would hope that it will be quite significantly challenging, because, you know, this period was very, very hard. It was a lot of hardship on these people, and to survive and actually build a successful community was a massive achievement in this period. The only thing I suppose which is positive is that in this period of time people were very spread out, and so you wouldn't, you know, just walk down the road and start bumping into other people. You know, there was not a lot of people around. You might have some smaller communities, and so the people were very kind of sparsely distributed. So there's plenty that remains to be seen about this game, but I'm pretty excited about it. I like the direction that this game is going in. It's a concept that I wanted to see for some time, and I'm really pleased that someone is actually bringing it to the table. There's a lot I want to find out, like, are they going to go beyond just the basics of a wood chopper, a fisher, you know, a hunter-gatherer, a farmer? Are they going to go into sort of more skill details, like guys who could be like flint workers, guys who could be, you know, proper detailed woodworkers, builders? I mean, Banished did that pretty well in terms of having a lot of diversity within its townspeople's trades, but you know, we would like to see that more with this game as well, sort of loads of detail. And again, when you think back to Age of Empires and think about how you could have like a farm, but then you could upgrade that farm to have like, you know, different ways of working. And again, so I hope they have that as well, where they develop different tools for a specific task. Basically, what I always want to see with these games is not just you are a guy who chops down trees. You know, I want to see it go a bit beyond that, different skill levels. RimWorld was quite good in its ability to kind of skill people up and down in different trees. So I don't know. Basically what I'm trying to say is I want to see good amount of detail within each person. Now, whether that's kind of what they're going for in this game, I don't know. It remains to be seen. But that's what I want. I want to see levels of detail, because it really allows you to get your teeth into it. It really allows you to feel like this is a growing, developing community. It's not just like, that's a chopper, that's a farmer. It makes you think, okay, this is a guy who's developing skills, he's becoming a really, you know, valuable member of the community. And then that takes you on to a next level, which is that then if you have a plague, if you have a famine, if you have a raid, and your most skilled worker gets killed, that is a devastating thing. If you have a plague and you lose a lot of knowledge, because that is a real thing. You know, you've got to remember, back in these times, you know, they're not having like schools where you can go and learn stuff and multiple people are learning all these things. You know, you're going to have one guy who is your flint working guy, you know, and then he's going to have like someone come up under him, maybe his son or maybe somebody, you know, and they're going to learn that trade, and then they pass on that knowledge, So if those guys get killed, you know, you're going to lose that knowledge potentially, which is a devastating blow to your community. And again, actually, that is very similar to less something like Banished and something much more like RimWorld, where in RimWorld, if you have like a guy who's your really good farmer, if you have a guy who's like your really good builder or really good at shooting or whatever their skill is, if that person gets killed and you lose that person with that really good skill, it is a devastating blow to your community, because suddenly you're hamstrung and it's going to inhibit and have a big problem for other things that you're doing. So I hope that that's where they focus some of this. I hope that they focus on the core sort of details of the people in the community and not just the basics. So a lot to find out, but this game looks really cool. It looks really exciting. I'm very much looking forward to finding out more about this. If you want to find more about it, guys, I've posted the links down below, so go check that out, as well as their IndieGo campaign. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you have any games which are in really early development which you think are worth looking at, be sure to throw that to me on Twitter. Links for that are down below as well. I'll see you next time.